So just going through here, this is a tech talk about kind of an introduction to DNA Center and some of the things that you can see within DNA Center. So what we've got here, okay? So I'm in a DNA Center appliance at this point. My name is Russell Hughes, by the way. Just to give you kind of an information about it, anytime you want to get back to this initial homepage or this initial dashboard, you can just click on the Cisco DNA Center up over here, and it should bring up this dashboard that we've got available for us. So you'll see down here, it first off gives you kind of a summary, the health of your network, all the different devices that we're monitoring. As we add those devices into inventory in DNA Center, they monitor those devices. You'll see that we can also go through and create things like sensors on them to look for thresholds. Think CPU utilization, memory utilization thresholds that we could have on there. We can look at the idea of a wireless access point. What do they have as far as power is concerned? We see how many clients are connected to the network as well. So not only do we have the look into the ability of our network devices, but the actual clients that are connected to us as well. This allows us to do things like network admission control on that network. The idea we can verify whether or not we've got users that are not only connected to the network, but are they secured as well. I'm going to do one thing here. I want to make sure everyone's got everything muted here. So let me just...
Oh, yeah.
So we also see how many wireless clients we have connected as well. Again, verifying that they're up to date with things like security patches that we have. Maybe you're looking for DAT files for any kind of virus detection that we look for. Again, they give you kind of a network snapshot. How many sites do we have in this network? You'll see we have to create a network hierarchy that has essentially the entire globe to begin with, and then you go through and break it out into different areas, and then in those areas you have different buildings, which are considered to be sites. So this particular site, we have this particular network, we got 12 sites in here. How many networking devices are we connected to? Notice they show some of them are unclaimed, some of them are unprovisioned that we're looking for, right? Which means that they're added into DNA Center. We know about those devices, but we haven't provisioned them to be a part of an individual site just yet. We can see some of our policies that we've got available for us. The network profiles. Network profiles allows us to be able to have information like for each individual device. You've got a certain approved iOS version for that, and you create that with your network profiles. And this shows you the different images for all those different devices. You'll see one of the nice things about DNA Center, it allows you to keep track of which iOS versions on not only every single device, but then going through and saying, hey, if we want to do upgrades, we can do upgrades on multiple devices at the exact same time. I can import a new image file for a new iOS version, for instance, and deploy it on all my 3850s. Okay? I can do that all at the exact same time. They show you how many licensed devices we have. One of the nice parts about DNA licensing is that it is not tied to the product ID. Right? So if you have a router or switch that fails and we get in a new device, we're not going to necessarily need a new license file for that. We can take the old license file and apply it to the new device. Okay? So it allows for that licensing to be much more manageable within here. And then you'll see some things down over here on the next portion of this page. These are all the applications that we have within DNA Center. The design allows you to go through and create things like our network hierarchy that we're looking for. Allows me to assign things like AAA servers. If you're going to tie this into ICE or the Identity Services Engine, right? We do that underneath the design aspect of this. It allows us to add locations to the different network. It allows us to designate golden images. Right? So the golden image that we have for a certain specific device, let's say a 9300 series switch, right? What we've got is we'll download an image and we'll mark that image as the golden image. This is the image that all of our 9300 should use at this point in time. Right? If they're not, then it'll show us which ones need to be upgraded or downgraded for that matter. You can also create wireless profiles, different SSIDs within here as well. Our policy allows me to segment the network, and there are really two possible segmentation types that we can do within DNA Center. As I show, you can segment your network as virtual networks, what we call macro segmentation of our network. Essentially what these are we're creating VXLANs that can go from access layer switch to access layer switch through the fabric environment. And that fabric environment might extend, even if we really wanted to, across a WAN connection. So I could actually keep people in a branch office and in the corporate headquarters in the exact same subnet. They also allow you to create scalable groups to describe our critical assets that we have within here. So scalable groups tags that we utilize, DNA Center calls them scalable groups. If you look into ICE, they call them security group tags. But the whole idea is to say, as a user connects to the network, it essentially puts them in this group that tells them what other traffic can they send to other groups within inside their virtual network, what we call micro-segmentation in DNA Center. And we can define that segmentation policies to meet your policy goals as well. Right? So these right here are creating contracts between different security groups that we have in ICE that says what kind of traffic can go from one security group to another security group. We then have our provision application out over here. Again, within provisioning, we can discover devices. They show you can go through and manage unclaimed devices. We can set up our fabrics across the different networks. Right, so setting up the fabric would be an underlay network that we use. Again, it's how we get from one device to another device, where we utilize the locator ID separation protocol. And then on top of that underlay network, we create virtual networks, which are known as overlay networks. Okay, so these allow the actual users to communicate through that underlay network. We got the assurance application within over here, and this is going through and being able to look at things like the different wireless access points. Are they up and running? Are they healthy at this point in time? Do we see like a low battery, or is there too much noise on it? All sorts of different things that we can look for. And we can look at not only the health of our individual networks, but we can look at the health of the individual users as well, if we're using the network admission control. Underneath the platform is where you can configure third-party applications and integration within the DNA Center. Essentially, you got to think about the idea of the concept between DNA Center and the Identity Services Engine. In ICE, what they've got is what's known as PX Grid Services. Now, PX Grid Services in ICE allows for third-party applications and third-party APIs to be able to connect and integrate into ICE. Essentially, we are going to be treating DNA Center as a third-party application in ICE. And so all we're going to do within here is we're going to go through and create it as a new integration as a AAA server for ICE. It uses that PX Grid Services and the REST applications to go through and send information. When I make a configuration change in DNA Center, it can then update ICE on how ICE has to go through and make sure that this is still a secure network at that point in time. Now, we've also then got tools. If we go down here at the bottom, we've got these tools that we can use. You'll see there's a discovery tool to go through and find out all of our devices that we have available. We've got our inventory tool. Let me click on the inventory and just kind of show you what we'll look at. This shows you all the devices that have been added into DNA Center that we go through and manage. You should be able to see in each one of them whether or not they're reachable or unreachable on these devices within here. Are they managed or not managed? Right, so you see right here that most of these are already being managed. What type of device is it? Is it an access layer switch, a distribution layer switch, a core layer switch? What site is that device in, so we can have them in multiple buildings? If I want to go through and click on one of these guys, let's just look at, these are almost all of our access points here. Let's just look at one specific access point. It gives us the name of the access point, the IP address, the MAC address, the version of operating system, how long it's been up and running, its product ID, what wireless LAN controller is dealing with this particular access point. So it gives us all sorts of information. And again, this shows us information about individual switches as well. Let me see if I can find a switch in here. Here's an access layer switch. And notice when you look at an access layer switch, they give you things like their IP address for management purposes, how long it's been up, what type of device is it. This is a 4507 right here. They show all the different interfaces that we're communicating with. And these will be both physical interfaces and logical interfaces, like loopback interfaces and VLAN interfaces. Are they up or down or not? What do they have for an IP address? What MAC address is on those? So again, it gives you a pretty good look into the rest of the network. I'm gonna go back to that main page here. I'm gonna scroll down to look at some of the other tools that we have available here. They've got a topology tool. If you look at your topology, it goes through and notice again, this is where we're kind of seeing our hierarchy of the network right out over here. We have the entire globe to begin with, and then underneath here they've created an area. They've got one called Africa. In Africa, they've got two different sub-areas, Egypt and South Africa. If I look at South Africa, oh, they're not even showing any devices in there. Let's see if we go through, I'll bet they added all these, because this is on a Cisco demo here. So you get to see that, like for instance, under San Francisco here, they've created different buildings in San Francisco, okay? They've got different buildings in San Jose as well. If I click on one of those buildings, it shows me the topology of all the different devices that we have in DNA Center at this point, okay? And again, you should be able to see the role that they got. It gives you kind of a health of those devices. Are they up and running? Like this one that's red tells me it's down, I can't reach it, where the green ones have got good health. The orange ones tell me, hey, there's something wrong with it, but I can still get to it to manage that particular device. It shows how they're all directly connected to each other. You can actually look at individual links as well. So if I click on the link, it shows me information about that link, how much bandwidth we have available for it. It shows you the devices that might be connected to that individual interface. If it's a Cisco device, we can find that, or it's a device that's been added, like a client device. What type of traffic can be looked at within here. So you can go through and set up a filter to look at what we have from each individual link. Notice when you look at like a link that goes to, there are 14 physical links in this bundle that they've got between these two devices. Again, they show the different links that we have and the different devices that are connected to it. Right? There's some mentions there are IP addresses of those individual devices right here. So it gives you a pretty good view into what's going on within the network itself. As far as that topology view. Again, if I scroll back down to these tools, some other things that we've got is, again, this right here, they show the image repository that's being used. That's so that we can download a new iOS version or a new OS version for a wireless access point. Again, in this repository, we would create then a golden image, and that's going to be what we use for all of the devices that are of the same device type. Okay. We got things like a command runner, where we can run specific iOS commands on different devices if we wish. There's a license manager to be dealing with all of the different licenses we need within DNA Center. You can create different templates. They've got plug and play functionality, be able to discover new devices within here as well. You can go through, they've got device telemetry, so we can actually see some information about what traffic is going through that network and analyze that traffic. You can run data and reports. So there's all sorts of different things that we can look at within here. Okay. Now a lot of these as well, when you look at the applications up at the top, so we got the tools right here, and we said these are the applications that they have. You see, you can also get to the applications up here at the top in DNA Center as well. There are a few things that you'll see on different devices where you have to hit this little gear button, and you can look at things like system settings, for instance. And this gives you information about the different hosts that we've got available that we've added into the system. We can go through and look at our software updates, and it'll tell us information about the different devices that we have in here, what iOS version should it be using. If I go into settings here, you can go through and add in things like authentication and policy servers. This is where we go through and add in an integration within ICE. And you can even see right here that they've got their server, 172.21.228.240 is a radius and TACAC server. It's actually their ICE server in this case that they do all their policy from. If I go into data platform, it gives me information about what's going on with the network data platform. We can do analytics for our different types of traffic that are going through. You can set up NetFlow data collectors within here. You can go through and set up things like if you're going to do backups of configuration files, where you're going to store those, so an FTP server or secure FTP server that we can send outbound. View the different metrics that we've got for the different interfaces. And you can look at each one of those things if you wanted to. You can see the different users that have been added to the network. At this point in time, this would be to change a user's password. They're going through with the user that I logged in as on this particular device. And you can also do, obviously, some backup and restores. It doesn't look like they have any backup or restore set up just yet. But you'd have to go through and set it up to be an FTP server, what file directory we're going to send that to, and then take a backup, and it stores that information. I've been really impressed, as a matter of fact. I played quite a bit with their backup and restore. It just seems to work, okay? Which is a great thing to hear, to tell you the truth, about some of the Cisco devices that I've been looking into. But the idea that it just works the way it should work. So I've gone through and played around on a network where I started off with one single configuration and made a whole bunch of configuration changes and created a backup, then restored the old config, made a whole bunch of different changes, created a new backup, restored from the original config. And again, it just seems to work very well, as a matter of fact. It takes it only about a half an hour to 45 minutes. I'm assuming that's going to be a little bit longer if you deal with the idea that it's a very large network with everything that's got to be backed up on it. But one of the things we need to remember is that when we make a change in the DNA center, the idea is that that gets pushed out to all the individual devices. So even if DNA center is not available, all the devices still work just fine, right? So there's nothing wrong with your network, even though DNA center is not necessarily available. Okay. Now, we wouldn't want to be making any changes to it, like a manual iOS configuration change. I wouldn't want to do that while I'm doing this backup and restore. But the fact that DNA Center isn't available to the rest of the network doesn't cause any problems, which is quite nice. Okay. They show over here under our policy that we can create new virtual networks. I can do group-based access control, the idea of what people can change in DNA Center. There's IP-based access control as well. So this would be based off username and password information that will assign that user to a group versus based off of the individual subnet that they're on or the IP address that they're coming from. We can see things like traffic policies are configuring, what kind of copy policies are we setting up. I can create more scalable group tags, and I can see the different IP network groups that we've configured as well. And they see all their policies that they've created, what type of policy it is, what devices that used on. Gives you kind of a description if they put it in there. It doesn't look like they created any real descriptions within here. And we'll see how tightly integrated it is to ICE. If you go through on the scalable groups, and you even wanted to go through and say, this shows you all of the scalable group tags that we've created on this network. But if I went through and said, let's add in a new security group, you should see that that takes us directly into ICE. So notice it's opening up another web browser right here to try and take us into their identity services engine. I'm not quite sure whether or not this is actually going to work, to tell you the truth, because it's a demo version that they've given me. So it may not actually have an ICE server that they can configure. Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay. But what it would do, it would be taking you into your identity services engine to be able to create then a group in ICE. And then we can create a contract to say what groups can communicate with what other groups. Essentially, it's an easy access list, if you will, to say what kind of traffic can go from one security group to another security group. So some good information within there. And you'll see not only we have group access control within here and your under scalable groups, we can look at their access contract if we wish. These contracts tells us what is going to happen within these groups. If I look at a specific contract, I can go through and edit that contract within here. And it should show me. Not working. Okay. Let me edit that policy. Of course, well, again, a demo version. But this policy gives me information about what we can communicate from one security group to another. And they show you, in this case, they're going to access control for the ICE, and they're going to deny TFTP, and then they would permit one other thing, and then they're denying everything else. Right? So it's an implicit action in this case. If I don't explicitly permit it, I'm going to deny. Notice how you can change that implicit action to be a permit. If I don't explicitly deny it, everything else is permitted. You can see the type of protocol that's being used within there and what kind of action are you seeing. So they're seeing at this important time that they got RPC that they're going to deny to that particular contract. We go into provisioning. You'll say, we got, again, all of our inventory that we've got available for us. And this is where we can assign information for like, what site are these guys going to be a part of? These should show, here it already shows the site that these guys are all applied to. This also allows us to go through under LAN automation. I can go have it automatically go through and find other devices that may not currently be set up just yet. You can look at the network telemetry, you can upgrade, see whether or not it's ready to perform a network upgrade, which is kind of nice. These are just the devices. If I go under fabric up here at the top, this shows me the idea of what type of fabric am I using. So they've gone through and created a San Jose fabric. And underneath this San Jose fabric, they've got then different virtual or VXLANs that they've created within here. And these VXLANs are the overlay networks inside that building. So you might have a VXLAN for all your sales users that you might have, maybe a user group that you've got for guests that we communicate with. Right? So we can go through and set up these different overlay networks that keep people apart. It's essentially like creating a VLAN in a traditional environment that we're utilizing. The big difference is that the VXLANs, first off, allow me to create a lot more VLANs, because there's not a 12-bit number that we use, but a 24-bit number for VXLAN. So it's something like 16 million some odd VXLANs that can be configured. It also allows that VXLAN to be dispersed across multiple layer 3 hops. Okay? Normally, when you deal with the idea of getting a VLAN from one switch to another switch, we have to deal with trunking and a layer 2 connection between those two switches. Well, VXLANs allow me to encapsulate that VLAN information and send it to a host through an IP network, where it eventually gets to an access layer switch on the other end, and they can communicate essentially as if, even though they're through a layer 3 cloud in the middle, they've essentially got layer 2 access between the two. Now, this is used a ton when you start dealing with the idea of going from access layer switch to access layer switch from a wireless standpoint. Okay? Wired clients don't necessarily move nearly as much, but it also see quite a bit in the idea of a data center as well, right? As it goes from data center to data center, we might have a layer 2 connection between those two data centers, and we might want to go through and say, hey, let's migrate a virtual machine from one data center to a different data center. Right? The idea is that it can still be up and running with the same IP address, same subnet mask, same default gateway, and still be reachable, even during that move process. Okay. And now it's availability to do that through a layer 3 network in the middle. So imagine that we've got two data centers that are connected with a layer 3 MPLS connection in the middle. Right? We still have a quasi layer 2 access between the two sites, right? Through that encapsulated layer 3 environment. We have underneath here, under assurance. Assurance gives us information about the health of our different devices. And we can kind of see, you give wired clients and wireless clients that we have, how much activity are we seeing, how many devices are connected and active. We also get, in this dashboard, you get SNMP information about different people that are connected back and forth, users that, excuse me, users that disconnect, users that are having problems on that network. We get to see the different devices that we've got available to us as well, and the general health of those devices. And underneath this assurance, you can go through and look at the different dashboards. There's a sensor dashboard and a dashboard library. The sensors are something, as the network administrator, I can create a sensor to essentially set thresholds. Right? What do I see as good and bad on the network at any point? Now, they have a bunch of default sensors that they use as well. Right? One of those is going to be things like they show how many locations we have and how many failures do you have. Right? How many clients do we have on each access point? And we can look at each individual access point if you click on those access points as well. Okay? So if I go through and give you information about a specific access point, it'll show you failure count. That's all it shows in this case, all right? You see the top 5 tests, each test that they're running within here to verify that we can reach different devices. Can I get to a DHCP server, a DNS server from that device? Can I onboard it into DNA Center? You can create tests within here, and they show you that not only what tests are running, here they show you the different tests that they're running for that. Notice they created like an IPSLA test right here, and we get to see that IPSLA is failing at this point in time, but the web browser to be able to reach that access point is still up and running. So you can go through and see all the different tests that can be created and the different devices that we've assigned that test to, and whether or not they're good or bad tests. If we go under things like the issues, we can look at the global issues that we're looking for here. This would give you information about any of the devices that currently have an issue that we need to look into. How many instances, how many times has it occurred, right? What kind of category is it that we're having an issue with? When was the last time it occurred? We can go into that device as well to find out what happens within there. You can see these are all our open case. We see resolved cases and what cases have also been ignored. In this case, it doesn't look like anybody's actually done any work on any of these. They're just all open cases. And again, underneath management over here, we can go through and create different tests. I can schedule captures of certain types of devices or network traffic as it goes through. So essentially, it's acting as if it was a Wireshark type of data analytics to collect that traffic. Under our platform information, we get to see a lot of the different things that we can set up within here. We can create bundles of devices that are all going to have the same access results if we wish. They got a runtime dashboard to verify the figures, are they up and running. You can go through, there's a developable toolkit that you can use to create new APIs for third-party apps. And I can go through and view the global configurations of all of our devices as well. Okay. Now, you can go through and manage these platforms, like different bundles or configurations that we have within here. You've got, under your developer toolkit, great new APIs that we have. I can integrate flows from different third-party vendors that already support an API that can connect to DNA Center. You can run data and reports for that. And then we also have our runtime dashboard as well. Again, those are the same things that we saw on that main page there that we have available for us. It's kind of all the different things that we have available for us in DNA Center. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but it's just kind of an introduction of what you guys get to see for DNA Center. Does anyone have a question on that? Okay. So one of the things that I would be looking into in this case, when you start looking into design, to design our network, it comes in to begin with our network hierarchy. We said in this network hierarchy, you start off at a global configuration state, if you will, that deals with the entire globe. And then we can create, I can, underneath here, add a site. So each one of these are different sites that we've created. And so I've got Africa and Asia and Europe and North America and South America. If I click on one of those continents, you see there's a little drop-down menu. Underneath North America, then we can create more sites. I've got Canada, Mexico, and the USA. Under the USA, I then created more sites, California, New York, Texas, and Washington. Under each one of those sites, we can go through and set up even more sites. We've got San Jose and San Francisco. And one of the beauties of this hierarchy is, you'll see later on when you go through and you configure different devices, like I create a pool of IP addresses. I can configure that underneath the global hierarchy. And then all of these sites underneath that global hierarchy inherit that pool of address, okay? Or that AAA server, or that DHCP server, or DNS server. So we can go through and inherit everything from the global site. Or I can go into an individual location and I can change that information for that individual location. If I change it for California, it affects all the sites underneath California. If I change it for San Francisco, it changes it for all the buildings in San Francisco. If I assign it to a building, it only affects that one single building. Okay? So the idea of this hierarchy that they use within there allows us to be able to inherit all of our information. Now, each one of these buildings You can even go through and import a floor plan for it to actually see the individual floors that we've got. This helps out especially when you start looking into wireless access points. What do we have as far as our reachability into each one of the rooms on that floor? Where are we seeing good access for that wireless access point? And in those highlight areas where you're not getting good access to that wireless access network. We have our network settings. If I go into network settings up here at the top, this is where we can go through and configure things like our AAA server. Okay? They've set up our ICE server as being our AAA server, and they even mention it as being ICE. You can use either radius or TACAX for it. We specify what they got for an IP address. Right? We can change a shared secret for it. Right? One of the things that we need to do is to be able to log into ICE to make changes to it. So this is a username and password that we have the availability to be able to get into ICE. I can set up DHCP servers for those locations that we have available. A DNS server, both primary and secondary if we wish. A syslog server, an SNMP server that we look for, an NTP server. We can assign time zones. Now obviously assigning a time zone to the global pool, probably not the greatest, okay? But for each and every single individual pool or what business or what building we're actually in, the time zone matters at that point. Notice we can specify a message of the day banner on the different devices that are in that location, okay? Or you can say, don't worry about that. Just leave whatever they've got on the local device, okay? So we can manage those messages of the day banner on the individual device. They've got right here the device credentials. This is to log into all of those devices at that site. One of the things we got to do is if I make a change in DNA Center, it's going to change the configuration of the devices in that building. So I need to know a username and password to be able to log into that device. Can we make a change? I want to be able to say things like SNMP credentials, right? And we see right here, there's SNMP version 2C read access and write access, and those are also SNMP version 3. So they've set it up for read access right now. If we go into write access, they've got credentials for a different username and password to be able to write things via SNMP. Doesn't look like they have any, they do have SNMP version 3 set up. And what they're gonna do for things like privacy, for the encryption, what we use for authentication password. If you're using the HTTPS server on the different devices, you can set up HTTPS credentials as well. Right? That's pretty much all we got for those data credentials. We then have address pools, and when we look at the address pools, you're going to see that there are address pools for the underlay network. How do we get from one device to another device? Then we also have address pools for each virtual network that we create. They have to have an address range that we're going to get for. And there's a subnet mask and a default gateway and a DHCP server and DNS servers. And we can specify, show you how many addresses are available in that particular pool. We can allow for overlapping addressing space if we wish from one network to another network or one building to another building. They're not allowing any of that here, so everybody has to have their own unique address pool. As they show, you can edit and delete those pools as well within here. And we'll see some things like if I go under North America, under USA, under California, under San Jose, and look at an individual building, right? They show you these are the address pools for that specific building. It's kind of tough to see here, but do you guys recognize this little green mark over here? I'll even put my cursor right there. So that little green mark that we're seeing right there tells you which building we're actually on right here, okay? So notice it looks like they configured another building, but they didn't add any address pools to it. Probably tells me that they don't really have any devices in that building for this demo. Right? Whereas if I look at this particular building, I'm seeing a whole bunch of address pools for all of their wireless access points. These are each SSID that we're going to be utilizing. The different VX LANs that we configure, each one of those has to be their own pool of addresses. Looks like they've got a global pool here, a campus pool that they created for that. That would be for the underlay network that's being used. You can go under profiles of different devices that we're looking at. Okay, what do we want for QoS? One of the things they're looking to add into this, let's just see here. Let's go to system settings. They show underneath here. Just let me change it. This should show me the version of DNA Center for this host. If I click on this host here, agent, the different services that are on here. Yeah, so here's our version 1.2.10, release 256, 253 that they're looking for as far as the version of DNA Center that's being used. And so you get to see that version that we have available for us. So lots of good information that we're seeing within there. It goes under provision. And they show eventually then the last network setting that we have is the different wireless access points we onboard and what SSIDs have we created on those wireless access points as well. So we can go into things like network profiles. Profiles allow us to be able to create profiles for individual devices, right? So think of as users bring in their iPhones, what applications should they be able to use on their iPhone? As I bring in an Android device, like a tablet, what applications should be used on that tablet? What version of that Android operating system should they have? How do I recognize that that's a secure device that we're looking for? If I can't ensure that it's a secure device, put it into a quarantine VLAN. That's all created by these network profiles that you have for these different devices that we have. And then we have different authentication templates as well that we can create. How are users going to authenticate within here? Okay? And they can authenticate with open authentication using things like 802.1x. They show they've got an easy connect. So this would be a DNA Center that kind of a client that you put on the individual devices. Right? And you can also have closed authentication as well to go through and authenticate with a username and password. Okay? Kind of a little bit of everything that we see within DNA Center. So unless you guys have any other questions about what we've got within DNA Center, it's kind of what I've got for you today. Any of you guys have any questions on it? All right then, well, thanks for coming and hope you guys come back to another one of our tech talks. Again, I'm Russell Hughes and I work for Sunset Learning, so.
Thanks, Russell.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, nice to meet you.